Welcome to First in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and who is Harrison Sawyer.
And I'm Alton Gansky, the author of about 50 works, most of them novels, and some novellas in there, and some nonfiction books.
I'm Molly Jo Riley, producer of the podcast and author of the Unemployment Cookbook and the upcoming mystery location novel, NOLA.
You know, my intro seems to be getting, it's not longer because I've dropped the First in Fiction, but it just doesn't have the same ring to it because, you know, welcome to First in Fiction, then ending with author of First in Fiction. It had that nice kind of a ring to it. And then Harrison Sawyer came and just ruined everything.
It's a tragedy. Life. Absolutely. It's worthless now.
Especially readers' lives. It completely ruined those, I'm sure. So I do have 3 5-star ratings on there, so that's always exciting. Thanks to those of you who have posted for that, and thanks to all of you who have posted reviews for any authors. It's greatly appreciated. Honest reviews are really helpful, and so we do appreciate those. Now, I do want to remind those of you listening to the audio only podcast, you can see us live Tuesdays 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on aarongansky.com. And that's probably the best way to find us there at aarongansky.com. Please don't forget to push that thumbs up button on YouTube for those of you YouTube watchers out there. If you're listening just to the audio, please go ahead and rate us and give us a rating in whatever podcast app you listen to. That also helps us out. So we do thank you guys for listening. We do have our dedicated listenership, and I know that several of you listen later because you can't make the time that we record live. So just really want to say thanks to all of you. Anything to announce before we jump into Ask the Author?
Yes, if you're in the chat room live, click the links at the top for Tweet, Google Plus, and Tumblr and Facebook, and give us some thumbs up over there.
I knew I was going to forget something.
I was just waiting for you to take a breath so I could jump in there and say that. And then something about a book release. Aaron, you have any new information on that? You already hit that, didn't you? I was busy in the chat room and wasn't listening.
The book
Never
release,
mind.
Just Harrison Sawyer, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mentioned Harrison Sawyer, and I got some reviews for that. Pop's Finder's Fee out there, still in the world, still doing okay?
Still galloping along.
And you've got the next Harbinger series coming out on, it's on Halloween, isn't it?
Halloween is when it comes out. Yeah, it's done.
Nice.
It's been through the edits and stuff, and so you can pre-order them if you want on Amazon.com and probably some of the other ebook retailers. But yeah, remember they're novellas. They're not full-length novels. They're not meant to be. Think of them as episodes on television. A series you watch, so they're an hour long or half hour long. That's what these are meant to be. That one builds on the other, and so this is actually number 16. And no, you don't have to read the first 15. You get enough information in each book to know what's going on. But so there are those. We're no longer selling the first, 12, because it's been bought out by another publisher, and they're going to be releasing it.
Wow, congrats.
Each one in a group of four novellas making up the one full novel. And so you may have a little more trouble finding that on the internet now, on the ebook places, simply because, once we signed that and things, we had to take it off so they could put theirs up when time came. So, but the last 4, see, mine was 16, so 16, 15, 14, and 13 are still available. Those are not under contract to the other publisher, so those are still out there.
So get them now before another publisher buys them up and you have to wait again, is what I would say. What's the title of the newest one, number 16?
At Sea. I return to one of my favorite topics, and that is weird ships. So the character wakes up on an old cruise ship, and he has no idea who he is, how he got there, and he's believed for the most part he's alone, except for the little nasty things out there. Supernatural suspense, so there's lots of little nasty critters and stuff like that. So
sounds very interesting.
And then the rest of the team gets involved too. So kind of fun. I had a lot of fun with it.
When you first said weird ships, I was like, now hold on, we've got a PG rating here. We want to keep this a clean show. Strange seagoing vessels is what you're saying.
I believe that's what I said, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just, I want to make sure that everybody heard what you intended. So, because there's we're moving on. Jenny Snow asks us via Facebook, and she's been waiting patiently for an answer to this. She says, what are the major plot points and reader expectations an author needs to hit for a romance, a mystery, or a fantasy? And I'm assuming that list can go on, Jenny, which is a really good question. And I feel like at one point we actually did a wild card episode on the expectations of particular genres. But to kind of condense everything, I don't want to take too long, but really, I mean, we could do an entire episode for each genre, much less just a look at all of the genres. And that would be a time-consuming episode, to say the least. I think the best thing for you, Jenny, is to read widely in the genre that you're writing. Find out what the best examples of this genre are and read those. And you'll get a sense of the expectations or rules that kind of govern that particular genre. I'd also talk with publishers and editors. And I think that's really important. You can find these people at conferences. You might be able to email them. They may or may not get back to you. But definitely at writers' conferences, it's really great to be able to talk with them and say, what types of books are you looking for? What types of things do you want to see in your particular novels? For example, I do some acquisitions editing for a small supernatural publisher or what, speculative fiction. And really what we're looking for is some element of the supernatural, the unexplainable, be that magic or zombies or ghosts or science fiction or whatever the case may be. There's got to be something beyond our natural world that we're looking for. And on those rare occasions when people submit something that's just kind of a medieval fantasy and there's no speculative element, the question becomes, what makes this actually fantasy as opposed to historical fiction? And I've had this conversation with Dave Fessenden, my agent, who's currently listening to the podcast. Hi, Dave. Good to see you again, or at least say hi to you virtually. And we've had that kind of conversation. Like, we need, for the publisher that I acquire for, I'm looking for elements of the supernatural. And if that's not there, then I simply say this isn't for us. So getting a chance to speak directly with editors and publishers is great. Familiarizing yourself with their websites, because they will make their requirements known there, help you out. But I still kind of come back to this idea of read widely in your genre. Of course, there are some stereotypical setups: romance, boy gets girl, boy loses girl, boy gets girl back. Fantasy usually takes the shape of the hero's journey. Mystery, there's usually a dead body early on and the revelation of the murderer by the end of the book, those types of things. Now, even though your book may conform to those types of traditional setups, it does still leave you a lot of room for originality in how you kind of tweak some of the tropes of that genre. And some things you can tweak and people will really love it. And some things readers don't want you to change or to tweak because they want to know there's a familiarity in reading in a particular genre. So what I would say is kind of learn the quote unquote rules of that genre by reading widely, by talking to editors and publishers, checking out the websites, etc. There are lots of ways to do this, but the big thing is to make sure that your work is going to satisfy the readers of that genre. I am not positive that I've cleared that up for you at all, but hopefully it did. Pops, what do you say?
Well, I'm a big believer in the 3-act structure, and I think perhaps that's one of the things Jenny's getting at, because she uses the phrase plot point. For those new to the writing, a plot point is a device, a transition point, a threshold, a door. It's been described in many ways. Between acts. In a 3-act structure, you have 2 major plot points. Sometimes you have one right in the middle, so you might have 3. And again, these are generalities. You don't want to get so caught up on this thing that you can't be creative in the story. But 3-act structure fits almost every genre, if not every genre out there. So it doesn't matter whether it's romance or cozy mystery or supernatural suspense or thriller, crime, police procedurals, whatever. If you have a 3-act structure, you can't go wrong. Now, there's a bit of a movement out there that says story over structure. I don't see that it's one or the other. You need both. But if your structure is tying you down, remember the story is what matters. So what is the structure? Well, we did do a program on this, but very quickly, Act 1, well, you'll have a setup, so you might have a prologue. Then there's Act 1. That's about 25% of the story. Bearing in mind, cozy mysteries and romances and westerns are usually shorter than epic fantasy and so many other stories, thrillers, that kind of thing. So about 25%. Then about the next 50% is Act 2, and then the last 25% is Act 3. And I've just got to give the advice because no one ever listens to me when I give it, but I want you to listen to this part. Don't get caught up on that too much. If your Act 1 is 30%, there's no problem. No one's going to grade you down on it. Do what needs to do. And I've done stories in 2 acts, and I've done them in 4 acts. It really depends on the story, but most of the time, the 3-act structure is my go-to, whether it's just short like a novella or whether it's long like a full-length novel. It has never let me down. So now your story is what's going to dictate whether or not it is a romance or a western or fantasy, that sort of thing. And the elements that go into the story will be different. Not so much the structure, but the elements that go into the story. Is it a hero's journey? Is it one person against the world? Is it a thriller where if a person doesn't win, if your protagonist doesn't win this thing, half the continent disappears into the sea, whatever it might be.
And what about you, Molly?
Well, I don't feel like I have enough professional writing under my belt to answer this question with authority. So I was really glad to hear both of your responses. I agree with them. And I would also add my input for the reader expectations. Forgo the expected. That is, while there's a certain structure and guidelines, create a new story with unusual twists. If you're writing the romance, don't just have the boy lose the girl. Create a reason that they can't be together. If there's a mystery, throw in a barrel of red herrings and do it in a way that the reader doesn't know they've just read a clue or a distraction. Be real subtle or throw it in their face, but definitely change things up. The reader wants to be entertained, and that is the first and most important expectation.
Well said. I was very stealthily and ninja-like finding links to those podcasts that we mentioned earlier, and finding links to include on the show notes. So Ginny and anyone else who's interested in our responses to these, we did a Halloween genre spooktacular, which was roughly, I think, 1 year ago. And I've put the link in the show notes to that, as well as the Pops, the one that you're mentioning, the 3-act structure, which I can't remember exactly how long ago we did, but I put that in the show notes as well. So if you're interested in more information on either of those, please be sure to take a listen to those. So there's that. Tonight, we've got a wild card, 10 reasons why you're not getting published. And so what we're going to take a look at here is the fact that we're going to assume many of you have written books, have maybe even gone through the submission process, or you're getting close to that. You will probably have at this point already received a few rejection letters, be it for short stories or for novels. If not, you probably will at some point. It's very common to get those. And so what we want to talk about is some of the reasons why you're not getting published. What is it that editors are looking for that you're not providing? Or what is it that you are providing that editors are a little bit leery of? And the first thing that I want to say is that publishing is really a tricky business. Oftentimes the answer to the question why you're not getting published is the fact that the publisher simply wants something different than what you've written. That's not a bad thing. I'm going to use a football analogy here, if you'll excuse me. But the Miami Dolphins, my favorite team, have a way of finding really good quality players and then not playing them or not signing them to contract extensions and letting the New England Patriots, who are the bane of my existence, sign them. And then I get to watch for the next 6 or 7 or 8 years that player that we decided not to sign because they just weren't good enough, absolutely just stab us in the heart with daggers every week in and week out, every time we play him. Wes Welker.
So pretty much you're just saying that your team stinks? I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I love him, but yes. And Wes Welker used to be a Miami Dolphin before he was a New England Patriot, and then we decided not to sign him again, and then he just absolutely murdered us. And the list goes on. There's actually a list of 8, 9, 10 different former Dolphins who went to play for the New England Patriots and just murdered us. So sometimes, those players didn't have what the Dolphins were looking for, but it doesn't mean that they weren't good. They were still quality. And so a lot of it's just finding the right publisher for what you've done. You have no control over that. You can't control what the publisher is looking for. What you do have control over is your manuscript. And if that's no good, your chances of being published are virtually nil. So what we want to do is focus not necessarily on the trends of publishing in this particular podcast. We want to focus more on what you can do to make your manuscript shine, to make it virtually impossible for publishers to pass over.
Yeah, and one of the first things I need to say is we have set this up in the negative. This comes from a continuing class I taught some time ago, and it is purposely set up in the negative where we're saying this is why you're not getting published rather than saying this is how you get published. We do that plenty of times, the latter. But we're doing it for a couple of reasons. Sometimes we need to be told what we need to stop doing, not just what we are doing and or should be doing. And sometimes it makes it just a little more memorable if we will put it in the negative. So, we're not bagging on anybody here. It's just so we can use this rhetorical device to help people remember the points. Sometimes it's a lot easier to remember when you say, this is what you're doing wrong, and fix it. Stop it, which you'll hear a lot tonight.
And I feel like, Pops, at some point, I'm going to speak for you here. Correct me when I'm wrong. But I think I know I've been guilty of several of these at some point or another. These are not uncommon to new writers. And I would imagine, Pops, early in your career or before you actually began your writing career, that you may have been guilty of some of these yourself. Is that an accurate assumption? No,
not at all.
Okay. Well,
I started off perfect. Yeah, everybody makes these. And of course, in publishing, it's... you're talking about football. It's like playing on a football field that changes while you play, while the game goes on. And that's often what happens is something will change. We're trying to be a little more generic here, but there are certainly some of these mistakes are things that I have done, and I have learned the hard way. This isn't what you should do. And a few times I've had to be told, knock it off, okay, because you're approaching this the wrong way. And that advice often is far more useful than the pat on the back. Sometimes a kick in the tail is better than a pat on the back. Al's axiom number, I don't know, assign a number to it.
I was just going to say, that sounds like an Al's axiom. Molly,
yep.
Get on that.
I know. I'm tweeting it right now.
Excellent. So the first problem here, transitioning very smoothly, I might say, the first mistake you might be making, the first reason why you're not getting published is because you think that writing will be fun and that it will be an easy job. Stop. Just stop. Or here's another one.
Why you got to burst my bubble right out of the gate?
It's just, I feel like that's the right thing to do. We've got a responsibility to crush dreams here. So we're going to come out swinging. The other reason, it kind of goes along with this, maybe you're writing to become rich and famous. And yeah, writing is fun. It is a lot of fun. It's also work. And I would go so far as to say that it's never easy. I will give a quick personal example here. I probably pounded out about 3,000 words today. I didn't bother checking. The total may actually be more than that. I could pat myself on the back and say, wow, that was really easy. But the fact is, I was at the end of the final book in the Hand of Adonai series. I knew the end was there. and I wrote up to that point. I knew where I was going, and at that point, the words came easily, but it was not an easy process. And writing the final word of the final book of that series was difficult, emotionally difficult. It's strange to feel like, hey, this series is going to end, and I'm not going to be doing anything with it anymore. I've assuaged some of my fears by saying, well, it still needs to go through editing and all that kind of stuff. But writing is not necessarily an easy thing. There are days where I can't write more than 100, 150 words. And the chances of becoming rich and famous off of your writing are astronomical. Most best-selling authors now are best-selling authors because they've already had a track record of being best-selling authors, or they already have a popular name. Celebrities can write books and sell a bunch of copies because people recognize the name because they're already branded and they've got their own marketing machine and all that kind of stuff. But for us peons, us mere mortals, if you go into writing for the money, you're doing it for the wrong reason. If you go into writing because you think it's going to be simple, you need to rethink that. It is a difficult labor of love, and it is absolutely labor. And if you're just doing it for any of the reasons that we mentioned before, you think it's going to be an easy paycheck, you're in the wrong line of work. You just need to kind of rethink that.
I quit. You've burst 2 of my bubbles, and we're only on item number 1 right here. I quit.
I'm living life correctly.
Our job here is done.
Is done. Yeah. Soundbite.
Tune in next week. When we
now accepting applications for producer.
The thing about becoming rich and famous is it can happen. It happens all the time. You just don't know if it's going to happen. I don't think there's ever been a tremendously best-selling novelist that knew it was coming. Stephen King got his start with a book called Carrie, which he threw away. His wife said, "We need the money. Take the book out of the trash can and finish it." He did. It sold. I made more of an advance on my first book than he made on his. Then his went to paperback, and that was pretty much the end of that. I think he got $800,000 or something like that for paperback rights. Half of that would have gone to the publisher, but still, nearly $500,000 in your pocket. It's a pretty nice thing. But he could not have expected that. He was rejected many, many, many times. And so that happened. Norman Vincent Peale wrote a nonfiction book, The Power of Positive Thinking. He threw his book away. He told his wife not to touch it. She wasn't to take it out of the trash can. And so she was a good and obedient wife and picked the trash can up and took it to a publisher. And had him take it out of the trash can.
Nice.
And it became a bestseller for decades. So you don't know. No one really knows.
I was ready to throw NOLA away last week. What do you think that means?
It means you're probably doing your job.
Okay, great.
I quit all the time. I go through tremendous periods where I say, well, this is just garbage.
Yeah.
Okay, now they're going to find out I can't do this job. I can't write. But you keep going and you find out it's not so bad after all. You just have to get away from it for a little bit. So those things can happen. I just don't know that anybody who could predict them, great success like that. And if they could, every publishing house would publish nothing but tremendous bestsellers. But they don't. Most of their books don't even earn out. So there's just really no way to tell. So dream big, but be realistic in that.
Am I the only one that finds the irony so delicious that a man who wrote a book called The Power of Positive Thinking gave up on it and threw it away? Yep. There's something, it's just rife with irony. I love that. So, but Pops, I think I've heard you say this before, that some people like the idea of being a writer, like it's prestigious. They can slap that on a business card and feel good about themselves, but not actually write. If you want to be a writer, you got to have a love for the craft, and it's going to take some sacrifice. And Pops, I think you said, what is it? It's far more fun to have written than it is to write.
Yes.
Because it's right. It's right. Writing is work. It's difficult. It's challenging. So the solution to that is to know that writing is a sweet torture. It's not easy, but it is very satisfying, and that it involves a very intricate craft, and you have to know that craft, and you have to know the industry like anything else. You wouldn't expect to become a football player without practicing. You wouldn't expect to make a football team if you've never played organized football a day in your life. You're going to have, we're just using all the football analogies tonight. You're going to have to work at it. You're going to have to study. You're going to have to learn. It's an art form, and it takes lots of practice, just like anything else. So we often think we're pretty good, and the reality is that we're probably not as good as we think we are. And the reality is also that we are not as bad as we think we are. On some days, we're going to be better than others, and on other days, we're going to be worse than we think we are. So we're probably somewhere in the middle, and there's some value in being honest with yourself in your own appraisal of your work, which we're actually going to talk about a little bit later. So Pops, what's another reason why we're not getting published?
Well, I'm going to use an odd term here, and I don't want it to be confused with the same term that references something else. But I encounter from time to time people who think that stream of consciousness writing is all you need. Now, I'm not talking about the genre style of stream of consciousness. I'm talking about those people who think, I'm just going to sit down and crank this out, and because I have a great idea and it will be wonderful, and knock out 300 or 400 pages without editing it, without rereading it, without reading anything in that particular genre. I once received a proposal, and it came with an email that said, I've sent my proposal out several times, and I'm getting no bites. What am I doing wrong? And so I began to read the proposal, and the proposal said, I don't read much fiction, but I know I can write better than what's out there.
Oh,
and I said, well, let's just start with that.
Oh, no.
Okay. Yeah, knock it off. First, you just said, I don't find fiction interesting, but so I'm going to diss what it is you do as a publisher and all your hard work, and then I'm going to tell you I can do it better than the people you're publishing. Well, that's it. He's drilling holes in the bottom of his own boat with that. I want to do this really quick, and I'm just going to become rich and famous from it. Yeah, stop it. Just stop it. It's not going to happen that way. A well-written book is a well-rewritten book. That's Al's axiom number 6. If you want a well-written book, that means you have to rewrite it. So a well-written book is a well-rewritten book. You don't just dash it out and say, ha, I'm done. You go back over it. Now, how you do that, whether you get to the very end and then go back to the beginning and start over, that's fine. Some do that. Some do it piecemeal as they go along. I've done it probably every imaginable way, but I do have to go back and read it. In fact, I let my computer read it to me so I can hear it. And I catch probably more mistakes that way. So here's the solution. You need craft. Craft is learned. It does not come to you in a dream, and there is no medication you can take that can make you a craftsperson. You need craft, and craft is learned. Craft has to be practiced and studied. Leonardo da Vinci was great, but he had to keep practicing, and he had to keep doing it. The solution is, and we'll probably mention this again later, is ruin your reading. That is, read a lot, especially in the genre you want to publish in. It's okay to take a break from that while you're writing so you're not stealing stuff. But learn from what you're reading. Those are your mentors, those people you read. And then learn the basic structure of a novel. We talked about that a little bit. But get some of the books. Learn some of the technique with that. And understand this is a craft. You can't just drop down in the middle of it and be brilliant.
Well said. I was originally going to say that you can't learn writing by osmosis, but I think there is a lot of value of reading, and I guess that would be the literary equivalent of osmosis, but reading definitely helps. As you've said, Pops, practicing and studying definitely helps. If you've got an opportunity to take a few classes in creative writing, I would definitely suggest that. And Pops, you mentioned that stream of consciousness for a time was a very popular genre in which to write. Stories like The Jilting of Granny Witherall. Some might argue that William Faulkner wrote a lot in the stream of consciousness style. But what we forget is that those are the masters of their crafts who have worked for years to perfect it, because I think stream of consciousness is probably one of the most difficult styles of writing, because you have to make something seem fluid and clearly understandable that is not fluid nor clearly understandable. If you've ever been inside somebody's brain, which most of us haven't, but if you had, you would realize how scattered our thoughts are and how many random connections are made in the span of less than a second. You can't really duplicate that on the page. And so the kind of the irony there is, if you think you're just going to sit down and write like that, no, these are the people who have put in years of study and practice before they've, really started submitting. And so you're going to have to anticipate that. Your first work is not going to be the one that you really want to submit. That's probably just a book that you get written so that you can write other things. That being said, some of you have written short stories and the like, and maybe you've placed them, maybe you haven't. I'm not trying to say that if you haven't placed a novel, your first novel is going to stink. I'm just simply saying, if you've never written anything before at all, whatever you write to begin with is probably not going to be that great. Your second and third and fourth pieces might be better. The Bargain is the second novel that I wrote. The first one, I've mentioned this before, will never see the light of day. It's in a drawer, a locked drawer. It's actually double padlocked, and it's got, laser guided, rockets that will come at you if you try and open it. It's just not good, and nobody's going to see it again. They don't need to. That was my practice. So study the craft. A third reason why you may not be getting published is because you think the book is the greatest thing since The Lord of the Rings. It's not.
You don't know that.
I feel like a jerk. Maybe it is, but the chances are very, very slim. What you want to do is you want to dream big. It's okay to have that big dream, to say, I'm going to write a book that's bigger than Lord of the Rings. Good, great. Challenge yourself. Challenge accepted. Pick up that pen and do some work and work at it. And then when you're done working, work a little bit more and roll up the sleeves and go back to work. But you also have to live practically. Writing can be subjective, and it's very easy to fall in love with your own writing. I think the sign of a quality professional writer is one who is not in love with their own work, one who can read their own work and recognize the flaws in it. And I think the more you write, the more you do that. You become more self-critical. So love your work. There are times where you will absolutely love it, but you also have to hone your inner editor. And what I mean by that is, you're always going to have a voice in the back of your head, and that voice is going to be telling you one of two things. Hey, this is really good, or hey, this is really bad. The new writer with little experience is prone to listen to the voice that says, this is awesome, especially if they haven't read much. The practiced and experienced reader and writer is going to pay more attention to that voice that says, I've seen better. I had a professor in college for 3 or 4 semesters, or quarters rather, not necessarily in a row. But by the time I had him for the 3rd or 4th time, he knew me. He knew me well. And I turned in a paper one quarter, and he said, this is very well written. The analysis is tightly done and deep and very insightful. This would be an A for anybody else. I've seen better work from you, B-. And I thought, wow, like, what a jerk. How? And I wanted to challenge it. And I came up to him and I was like, what is this about? And he goes, is that your best work? And I was like, but you said it would be an A for anybody else. He goes, is it your best work? And I was like, I really hate that I kind of love you right now. So I went back and I worked at it. There was a lot of value in that. And so I kind of hear that voice. This is great work. Is it your best? And so that voice kind of guides my writing. And so the key is, you want to be able to tune out that voice that says you're no good, you'll never be any good, give up. You need to shut that voice up. But the voice that's saying, this is good, could always be better, let's spice it up a little bit, that's the voice that you want to listen to. And that's going to take some doing. And that's going to take some practice, which means you're going to have to do some writing. So that's the third reason why you may not be getting published.
Fourth reason is, you think it's the editor's fault. It's not. Stop it. Now, I've seen this many times where they say, the editors won't give me a chance. And then they give me their manuscript to read, and I say, well, no, I think they did give you a chance. And this is the kindest thing they can do, is tell you no, because it's not ready. It's not the editor's fault. With rare occasion, an editor may mess up. And they're people. They have family problems and illnesses and people they have to answer to and stuff. But it is seldom the editor's fault, as much as we wish it were. I would like it to be the editor's fault, because then I can always blame the editor. I recently found an error in one of my nonfiction books, and what I do then is I send a note to the my editor, the publisher, and I tell them about it so they can fix it for the second edition, if there is a second edition with that. And I said, I don't know how this got by me. And I feel really bad about it. And he wrote back and he said, no, don't feel bad about it. We should have caught that. So, those things need to be corrected. Everybody's going to make a mistake. And editors can also do the same thing. I've seen them change a couple of things that at times were just mistakes on their part. But the reason you're not getting published is we want to blame the editor rather than us missing the target or not doing a great job with it. So what to do then? The solution. Know that editors have committees and publishers' guidelines they have to live with, so sometimes their hands are tied with it. Publishing is a team sport. You don't get to do it alone. If you're going to be professionally published, you're going to be working with editors and different types of editors and copy editors and marketing and things like that. And that part isn't always fun. It depends, if you like that stuff. I never got real warm to it. Like it or not, great ideas get rejected all the time. You may have heard of the Left Behind series, which has sold millions and millions of books. Well, I know the authors of that, and I also know one of the editors that said, no, it's not for us, and rejected it. And he used to introduce himself that way. He says, hi, and he'd give his name. He says, I'm the guy that rejected Left Behind. So by rejecting it, it ended up costing the publisher millions, or an opportunity for millions of dollars. It happens. People are people with that. But if you want to blame the editor all the time, then you're just spiraling down. Don't do that. It's seldom the editor's fault. And sometimes it's just the publishing business.
And I'm going to follow that up real quick. The issue with blaming anybody other than yourself, and we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, sometimes it is the publisher who's just looking for something else. But the problem with blaming people other than yourself is that it absolves you of any sort of wrongdoing. And it means also that you are incapable of fixing the problem. There is no way for you to contact the publisher and say, fire your editor, they didn't take my book. You will be laughed at and probably hung up upon. Instead, looking at yourself, now you have an element of control. Now you have the possibility to rewrite and to make better and to improve. So rather than giving up and shrugging your shoulders and say, well, they just don't like me, take some responsibility and say, okay, this was apparently not for them. What can I do that's going to make this book a stronger book so that the next publisher that sees it is going to want to take a chance on it or is going to want to publish it? I don't know, Pops, if that's what you had in mind or not, but that's kind of the way I look at it. If it's something that you've done, you can fix it.
Yeah, or it just may not be for that publisher. Again, they have guidelines, certain things they have to meet. And what you may not know is the writer, and this has happened to me a couple of times, that a book very similar has just come out at that publisher. And so it'll look like a knockoff. And so they're not going to buy it. And there's just really nothing you can do. I had just a wonderful, wonderful storyline. It was going to be my next book. I went to a movie, and the trailer before the movie started was my storyline. And it starred a couple of really big actors, and it did well in the theaters when it came out. And it shook me to the core. Thankfully, I hadn't started the book yet, so I just set it aside. But it wasn't that they stole my idea. I didn't print anything. We just happened to be on the same wavelength. So,
wow.
So if I said, this is the book I want to do, they go, hey, that's just like the movie. And so sometimes they'll pass on that. There's any number of reasons why that can go on with that. So let me move us on to the next one, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
You think like a writer, stop it. Think like a reader. And I know this is counterintuitive. It's natural to think like a writer because we're being writers. But it is better to think like a reader and an editor. So really what that means is you want to get the story down right, and your audience is the reader, not other writers. Okay, so you want to make sure that you communicate to them. It's always keep your reader in mind when you're writing. You're not out to impress yourself. You're out to tell a great story. And if you do that, you will then impress readers. So it is much better to read like a writer and write like a reader.
Absolutely. We actually did a cast on that back in the day with Heather Luby, whose life is always on the go, and we hope to eventually have her back on for an episode or two, but she's just super busy, but very brilliant and very great insights. And we did a cast called Reading Like a Writer. I've put the link in the show notes for you in case you're interested in looking at that. But there is a bit of a, I don't know if you would call it an irony, but once you become a writer, you need to read like a writer and you need to write like a reader. And so there's that kind of unnatural, kind of counterintuitive is the word that I'm looking for, kind of a counterintuitive process that goes into that. And it's tough to read your own work like a reader, and it's tough to read somebody else's work like a writer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and one way to do that is read it out loud, or have your computer read it to you, because it's a different voice than what's in your head. And if you're a man and you're getting your computer to read to you, let a woman read it. If you're a woman, let a man read it. It will sound different to you.
That's a good point. I actually had not considered that. I did that naturally, which is strange. I don't know why. But I like my text-to-speech software, it has a female voice. And so that's interesting. Maybe I picked up on it just to give it that sense of otherness to it so that I'm not hearing my own voice reading it. So good point. Good point. Thanks, Pops. The sixth reason you're probably not getting published is because you bury your characters alive. So the problem here is that the writer has presented characters that are plastic. They're unbelievable. They're forced. They are thinly drawn. They are what we call stock characters. This is probably the number one reason I pass on books. As a matter of fact, I recently read a submission that I wanted desperately to like because I liked the setup. But the first character that I met was a caricature. He was a stereotype. And even the name just reeked of standard generic hero. And it was, just not, every cliche that you could imagine accompanied this guy. When he walked onto the page, he brought all the cliches with him. The second character was a lot more dynamic and real and flawed. But this character that became, that began as the perfect hero really just kind of soured me on the book. And so that's problematic. Your characters should really be the driving force of your novel. The best way to do that is to remember that readers are people and are drawn to people, not cardboard cutouts. Not every character they've read in the same genre every other novel. They relate to story through the characters. How the characters experience the story is how your readers are going to experience the story. You need to put your characters up front, and you need to make sure that your protagonist captures the readers and the editor's attention, that they come off the page, that they feel real, three-dimensional, tangible. Not just what they look like, but we've done several episodes. At the beginning of this year, as a matter of fact, we've done 3 or 4 different episodes on character and character development and how to accomplish this. And so it might behoove you to kind of go back through our archives real quick and look up those characters. On YouTube, we may actually have a character playlist that might be helpful for you guys to kind of watch again and ask yourself some tough questions. Are your characters doing what they need to be doing? Are they real? Are they genuine? Do they feel authentic? Or are they just kind of the standard cardboard cutouts?
Yeah. Number 7, you don't understand your own plot. That's why you're not getting published. Learn your own plot. Learn what your book is about. You'd be surprised how many times when I've been at a writer's conference and there'll be pitching sessions and somebody will come to me and they'll start to pitch me their book, and I'm starting to get lost. They only get 15 minutes. Those are 15 golden minutes. And they're pitching to agents and other editors, so I try to help them become better at their pitching of ideas. And the one thing I kept seeing over and over again is they couldn't tell me what genre their book was, what the reader's takeaway was going to be in the book, what are they going to learn or appreciate or experience or whatever it might be. And I'd ask them, well, what genre is it? And they go, well, I don't know. I was hoping you could help me because, it's sort of a romance. There's no such thing as a sort of romance genre. It is a romance or it's not a romance. You can have a story that has romance in it. Yeah, romance overtones, you can do that, but you need to know that. So I've encouraged people to be able to describe their book in 60 seconds or less and be ready to talk for 2 hours. Now, that's especially if you're going to be pitching it verbally, like at a writer's conference. But it's the same thing in proposals. It's the same thing when an editor wants more information. It might be talking to you on the phone. You're the expert in your book, so you should be able to tell them how many pages in it, how many words in it, who your protagonist is, who your antagonist is, why your antagonist is so bad, and who your readers are going to be, and if there's any kind of special takeaway that's in the book. You need to know that. You need to know who your audience will be. People who are going to read this are going to be people who like this particular writer or this particular writer. You have to become an expert in your own. It's not just writing a story and hoping that somebody else will figure out what it is you intended. They just don't have the time for that.
Pops, you coached me when I went to my first writers conference on how to do this effectively, and it was a completely foreign thing to me. It was absolutely intimidating, trying to do this elevator pitch or this elevator sell and this, trying to boil down a book as complex as the bargain into 1 or 2 sentences. And I was intimidated. And I remember you telling me the story that, you give them the quick little pitch, and if they like it, they'll kind of lean back a little bit and they'll think about it and they'll say, and then what? And then you'll have to give them more. And we rehearsed this. And then I went to my first editor and I pitched it, and he leaned back and he said, and then what? And I went, oh no, I don't know that I came up with the next part. I worked so hard on the first part that I don't remember what happens next.
Yeah, they lean in actually.
Yeah, I was leaning in.
You can tell if they're interested because they'll lean in a little bit, maybe cock their head to the side, and that means they're listening. It's when they lean back that they've disengaged with you. I remember that. Yeah, you were talking to my agent, and you were pitching the book, and that's what he did. He leaned in, and you did the first part, and you really got his attention, and then you froze when he asked for more, and he ended up saying, "Well, I'm listening." Your comment to me was, "I just couldn't believe you were right."
Yeah, that was spooky. How correct you. I'm not used to my father being right. You know how young kids are. But I found now, being on the other side of the table, being someone that writers pitch to, I like to be the one to talk with the people who don't know what they're doing. And I try and market myself that way. Hey, if you're working on your pitch, come talk to me. Because I have spoken to so many writers who want to tell me about their story, and they start with sentence 1, and they think that they're going to tell me all 350 pages. And I've got to be like, stop. We're skipping that. Just to the end. Just give me the beginning, the end. I don't care about the middle. We'll figure that out. And trying to put them at ease, and trying to give them an opportunity I'm trying to pass on a little bit of what you've passed on to me. And I find that very rewarding. But if you don't know that, if you cannot boil your book down to that 1 line, that 2 line, that quick paragraph, I would say that you don't really understand your story. You don't understand your own plot, as you're saying here, Pops. And what that means is that your prose is going to be pretty bloated, and it's going to be hard to follow, and it's going to be inconsistent. Discovery writers, as you say, or perhaps as I say, especially prone to this. I'm a discovery writer, and I am definitely prone to this. And I have to, when I'm doing a proposal, I've got to learn to cut right to the chase. And that can be a difficult thing to do.
And for those new to writing and to the to the program. A discovery writer, sometimes called an intuitive writer, usually works without an outline. They sort of feel their way. They work without a net. They don't always know where they're going, but they have that ability to figure it out as they go along. And it takes a special talent. It is not an easier way to go. Some people think it's easier because you don't have to outline. It's not easier. Most of my books were done in the discovery process, and it's a real headache with that. But we're not just talking about pitching to editors. You need to be able to formulate it in your own mind so you know what you're doing.
Agreed. Yeah. You do, and you also, knowing your audience is good. I don't like, in the part, we're going to talk about proposals next month, and one of the things that I like least is going through all the marketing analysis and things of that nature, but it is a worthwhile exercise. It's going to help you identify who your audience is. Audience is going to make you a better writer because you'll know what they want and you'll know how to deliver it to them, and you'll know what rules they expect to be followed and which rules you can break. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that next month, I'm sure. Right now, we are kind of coming up against clock, so I want to make sure we're moving through. Number 8 reason why you're not getting published, because you read like a reader, not like a writer. We've already touched on this, and what it really boils down to is that readers read differently. The former wants to be entertained or educated. The latter wants to analyze. Writers read differently than readers. At least they should.
I think you may have cut out there, and the part that was missing is readers and writers read differently.
Thank you. Yeah, readers and writers read differently. Readers care very little about, this is going to sound weird, they care little about the art of craft, but they notice the art of craft. And so the solution for you, and we mentioned this before, and I put the show notes in there, is that you need to read like a writer. And the way that you do that is you analyze the books that you're reading. Look at their structure. Look at their dialogue. Look at the setting. Look at all of the elements of plot and character, etc. Every book you read is a graduate education in fiction writing. You want to look at it as a textbook, not necessarily just a book, a fiction novel, which is redundant. Not as just a novel. Even if all you learn is what not to do. And there are several. Trust me, when I was at Antioch, I had to read several books per semester, and there were several and write critiques of them, and several of my critiques said, so now I know what I don't like and why I don't like it. And that was a learning thing for me. Pops, you say that successful writers read like a writer and write like a reader. That's Al's axiom number 4. I think we're running out of, I think there's like 7 number 4s now.
I think so. So can we bump this to number, say, 78 or something?
Number 14 or something.
Okay.
41. I don't know. I don't care. I make the numbers up. Now, successful writers read like a writer. That is, they're analyzing what other writers are doing. Just like musicians study other musicians, successful writers read like a writer. They write like a reader because they're keeping their mind on the reader. And those are two different things.
Absolutely. And then I've got a link here in the show notes again for that cast that we did with Heather Luby. Speaks more specifically about how to do that. Number 9 reason why you're not getting published: you haven't been ruthless with your writing. You've heard us say it before on this podcast. You have to be ruthless with your writing. The problem here is that you write the end and you go, yay, the book is done, I'm sending it off. Okay, you are not a high school sophomore English student. And even them, I don't tolerate that. When my high school English students turn in an essay to me, the first thing I say is, did you read this yourself? No, I am not reading it. I'm not going to read your first draft. No. But that's your job. No, it is not. No, my job is not to read your first draft. My job is to read the best work that you can produce, not the first thing that you produce. Mm-hmm. I don't want your lazy essay. You take it back and you work at it. You work hard like a writer. Then you bring it to me and I'll tell you how to make it better. That's my job. Okay? My job is not to find your typos and errors. I am not an editor. If you want me to edit your work, you're going to have to pay me in addition to what I'm making for my normal salary. Do your own work. Don't make me do it. I might get a little bit passionate about that. But the same goes for writers. Do not send your first draft to a publisher. Please. If you haven't taken the time to go back through and look for typos, etc., if you haven't hired an editor, how am I supposed to know that you're really locked in to this project, that you really care about it, that you're willing to invest your time and your energy into it? If you send me a lazy manuscript, I'm not going to take much time reading it. It's that simple. If you take your time and work hard on it, you'd be surprised how much time and energy I put into your manuscript reading it as an acquisitions editor. I can tell those who have taken the time, and I can tell those who haven't. It's abundantly clear, and it's clear almost immediately from the get-go. So get rid of that thought process that says, once I'm done with the first draft, I'm done. You are absolutely not. You've just started. Good writers are ruthless with their work. They're going to go through and they're going to cut quite a bit. Even if they love it, they're going to recognize what belongs and what doesn't belong. They're going to get rid of what doesn't belong. They're going to revise. They're going to challenge themselves. They're going to have a really good conversation with their inner editor, and they're going to make those tough decisions. They're going to wrestle with scenes and characters. I've cut entire characters out of novels.
Mm-hmm.
I've cut characters out of short stories. I've told good friends whom I love dearly, who I would consider better writers than myself, that they need to cut 3 of their 4 characters out of a short story. And it's tough for them to hear, but they've done it, and they've made those changes, and the story has become stronger. You have to be able to make those tough decisions. You've got to attack your adverbs, your exclamation marks. You've got to attack point of view shifts, stilted dialogue. You cannot be okay with that. You've got to get rid of it. Anything that is not of your best work, you have to kill it. You have to get rid of it, okay? So just know that going into it, it's going to be a lot of work, and most of that work is going to start when you write the end. Pops, what's the last reason?
The last one. Your story starts off slow, then bogs down from there. That should read starts off slow, not of slow, as I have it right now. Your story starts off slow, then bogs down from there. This is the problem. Failure to engage the reader from the start, and the reader leaves before they finish the first chapter. In fact, readers will often leave before the end of the first page. If you've watched them in bookstores, remember bookstores? They might read the first page. If they turn the page and keep reading, something good's going on. If they close the book and put it back on the shelf, then you witnessed a missed opportunity. So here's the solution. Start in the middle of things. And know that you only have a couple of pages to win or lose a reader. You certainly only have a couple of pages to win or lose an editor, because they usually won't read more than 3 pages unless it catches their attention. So you need to get things off. That doesn't mean everything has to be an explosion or a gunshot or a fist fight, but you just start in the middle of something. So, even if it's a family kind of thing, you start in the middle of breakfast or the end of breakfast while a conversation's going on, and the reader will try to catch up on the things they missed in the conversation. But you start in the middle of things. Also, you want to introduce your problem early, then you make it a bigger problem as time goes on. The old joke is the first thing you do in your book is put your protagonist up a tree. The second thing you do is you start throwing rocks at them. And the third thing you do is you cut the tree down. It just keeps escalating. Keep escalating the problem. So one problem leads to a bigger problem. The problem in the antagonist should be bigger and badder than the protagonist. The illustration I like to use, and I think I got this from a writer named Clark, not Arthur C., but a guy who teaches writing. And he said that if you ever watch Popeye, Popeye beats up Bluto, the great big guy. He doesn't beat up Wimpy, the guy who wants a hamburger. And the reason is if he beats up Wimpy, he's just a criminal. If he beats up Bluto, he's a hero. So you want your protagonist to have to face a bigger, badder antagonist. That doesn't always mean physically bigger. I've had a few in wheelchairs, had a couple in wheelchairs, I think, or have some other problem, but nonetheless, they are still a formidable antagonist, usually because they have money or connections or something like that. Evoke the emotions early on so people get connected to your protagonist, and then you continue your story on there. And what was it Kurt Vonnegut told us there, Aaron?
He says, start as close to the end as possible. That's one of his 8 rules for writing fiction. And I believe that, too, which is a line from Slaughterhouse-Five. I'm not sure if anybody got that, but that was a good little literary reference for myself. I'm going to pat myself on the head. Hooray.
Nicely done. Nicely done.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
But it says, get to the action. Don't make us wait around through the boring, normal day stuff. We've talked before on this podcast. If you're starting your novel with somebody waking up and looking in the mirror, probably not the best way to start your book. Start as close to the end as possible. As you say, Pops, start them with the character up the tree. It's a good kind of rule of thumb there. So absolutely. Those are the 10. Now, we've debated talking about a few more, but for the sake of time, not able to get to them. This is not a comprehensive list, obviously, but it is a pretty extensive list and a pretty good list of the common reasons why beginning writers do not end up getting published right away. Molly, do we have any comments and or questions from the room tonight?
We have so many comments. It was a very active chat room tonight. Dave Fessenden has a very great sense of humor. And when we were doing the Ask the Author question, talking about romance, he says, the boy and the girl can't get together if the girl has been eaten by a dinosaur.
That is true.
And, there's some legitimacy there. So that was interesting. Tess DeGroot says she tries to do the 3-act structure and often uses the hero's journey even in her romance books. Jacqueline Patterson dreads her first rejection letter.
Oh, Jacqueline hasn't gotten a rejection letter
That
yet?
means she hasn't submitted anything.
Okay.
So early on,
Jacqueline...
Stephen King used to teach at writers' conferences, and you couldn't take his class unless you had a rejection slip.
Really?
So
yeah, he used to put his rejection slips on a nail. He used to write when he was young in an attic, and he put his rejection slips on a nail, and then he had to take the nail out and put in a spike.
I remember, because that's in his book.
Yeah, that's right. It's just part of it. Don't dread it. Just keep writing.
As a matter of fact, you should probably frame it when you do get it, because it will come. Even if you sell like 50 books right away out of the gate, you'll probably eventually get one on your 51st book. But submit something. When it gets rejected, send us a letter and we will celebrate together. It's an opportunity to celebrate. Rejection is just an acknowledgement that you have taken the next step in your writing career. So it should be something to be embraced and celebrated, not something to be feared.
I agree with that. Dave says one of the reasons we're not getting published is because we're not submitting the manuscript or book proposal. A manuscript in a desk drawer will never get published until you take it out of the drawer. And on the heels of that, I was thinking the same thing. One reason for not getting published is the book is never finished.
Also true.
Yeah.
Also true.
Learning to going through a whole bunch of things, and my mouse isn't scrolling on the thing. Learning to turn off your inner editor is one of the hardest things to learn, because if the editor isn't turned off once in a while, you'll never write anything. Dave says that. And Dave is telling Jacqueline to send him something and he'll reject it so she can get over it. Tess says she wouldn't send her first draft to the editor, and as someone who has edited some of her works, I can agree to that, and I do appreciate that, Tess, that you don't send me a rough draft. Thank you very much. Jacqueline Patterson says Erin wouldn't let her hide under the table when you were reading her manuscript, so that's true. We're kind of beating up on you there. Dave says the Rockford Files put the perfect hero stereotype on its head with a recurring character, Lance White, played by Tom Selleck, who is so perfect it just made you sick, and you kept waiting for him to fall. Dave wants to know, Al, what was the movie that was the similar plot to the story that you were working on, or the idea that you had?
I believe it was called Conspiracy, and with
that was with Mel Gibson, wasn't it?
Mel Gibson, that's the name I was looking for. Yeah, with Mel Gibson, and I can't remember the female lead.
Isn't it Julia Roberts?
I think so. And I remember sitting in the theater thinking, well, nuts. It was a good idea. Of course, there were things that were different, but nonetheless, the basic plot was the same thing I had come up with.
And that was the one where Mel Gibson couldn't go into a bookstore without buying a copy of Catcher in the Rye, and that's how they were tracking him. And I remember that anytime I have a student read Catcher in the Rye and write about it, I always think of Mel Gibson and Conspiracy. I forgot about that. I had a book. My first novel was there was a movie called Heaven Can Wait with Reese Witherspoon and some random rom-com dude. And it was about a guy who falls in love with a ghost. And I was like, so there's my book. But theirs was funny and mine was, trying to play it straight and be like a murder mystery thriller and theirs was good and mine wasn't. So,
oh yeah, there was the Ghost and Mrs. Muir and that sort of thing. So
yeah. So it happens often. Sorry, Molly, go ahead.
Looking back it was a lot of chat in the room tonight. Dave says
Yay.
he thought it was Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. The movie. Tess says the writer's job is to get the main character up a tree, and then once they are up there, throw rocks at them. Vladimir Nabokov. And
Yep.
it looks like that is all the general, just a little chit chat, bashing on the Ganskys. I mean, very supportive of the podcast this evening. I believe that's about it.
Anytime you can bash on a Gansky, it's a good day, and that's why we're here.
So. I say that so often to anyone who will listen.
I think pretty much everyone who's met us has said something like that. So I can
see that being a catchphrase now. I'm so angry I could bash on a Gansky.
I got to share.
It sticks with you.
I want to share a quick personal story here. My son is attending the school where I work, and we've got a computer program that tracks positive behavior and negative behavior. Well, my son Josiah just happened to be the top positive point getter last week. So at our staff meeting, when we're going over that kind of data, our principal kind of looks at us and he goes, "I'm really upset about this, about Josiah getting the most positive points. Yeah, I haven't launched the investigation yet, but it's coming." I said, "Oh, you think you're upset? I'm really worked up over it." He goes, "Why? Because you're not the best Gansky in the house?" And I was like, "Darn right I'm not." And he goes, "I've met your wife. You're third best max." Thank you. I'm done. So anyhow, bashing on Gansky's good stuff. Next week, proposals. We're going to be looking specifically at query letters and bios and how to write those. Give you possibly some good examples, some bad examples, what kind of information you want to include, how to do that properly, if query letters even have a place in today's market. Do they? Do they not? I'm going to leave you in suspense for a whole week. Until then, don't forget that you can ask the author at aarongansky.com or facebook.com or Twitter. You can find us, Pops. You can find Pops at altongansky.com. You can find Molly at franklymydearmojo.com. And as always, you can find me at aarongansky.com. So we do thank you all for listening. And until next week, good writing.